This is a webcast recording for Modern European History for SI4, War in Iraq. When I say war in Iraq, I'm referring to the second war in Iraq, which occurred during the presidential administration of George W. Bush. Not to be mistaken with the first war in Iraq, which occurred during the first Bush presidency. Notice the images there, just to give you some visual context. This image of the statue being pulled down is a picture of the Saddam Hussein statue being dismantled, uh, representing his removal from power. Some background is necessary here. After the first war in Iraq, Saddam Hussein was given certain conditions by the United Nations that he must obey. One of those was the limitation of selling Iraqi oil on the world marketplace so that he would not be able to make oil profits into rebuilding his military forces that had been destroyed in the first Iraq war. The second condition that's important here is that he was forced to allow international weapons inspections to make sure that he was not manufacturing weapons of mass destruction. That all sets the kind of the background and the context for the second war in Iraq, which started in March 2003. This first link would be a good one to look at, as it would give you a slideshow of images, just kind of showcasing the war in Iraq realities. Please know that the terrorist attacks on 9/11 made George W. Bush a war president. Foreign policy became his first and foremost priority, which forced him and his security team to develop a series of policies to be able to confront the 9/11 world. And this policy is identified by the term the Bush Doctrine, which is the United States would preemptively strike first before any threat strikes the United States. The Bush administration saw Saddam Hussein, president of Iraq, as a threat, particularly because of his interest in developing weapons of mass destruction. The link at the bottom there is an important one for you to look at because it will give you some information about this moment. Here you have Secretary of State Colin Powell giving public testimony to the UN Security Council. What he's testifying to here is the evidence and information that the United States CIA had collected indicating that Saddam Hussein was making weapons of mass destruction, particularly biological and chemical weapons. As you can see in the image there, that was an image given as testimony to mobile production facilities that Saddam Hussein supposedly had, making it difficult to monitor and destroy, since it would be able to drive around and be parked and stored anywhere within Iraq, making it difficult for international inspectors to be able to discover. What we discovered later on was this information that Secretary of State Colin Powell was giving to the Security Council was in error. Much of the information was given by an Iraqi informant that was dishonest, did not reveal truthful information, and basically tried to encourage the United States to be able to remove Saddam Hussein for their own self-gain. The source of this information that Colin Powell based his testimony on was codenamed Curveball. And you could argue he threw the United States a curveball because he was not a reliable source of information. The justification for the war in Iraq was to go get Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction. Why? Because they would be a threat to the United States and the world. Therefore, the war in Iraq is a fulfillment of the Bush Doctrine. Please note that this has nothing to do with the 9/11 terrorist attack on American soil, killing Americans, or even finding Osama bin Laden and killing and capturing him. This is a completely separate set of objectives that the United States uh, policy is trying to accomplish. The link there is a good one to look at as it relates to the motive of finding Iraqi weapons of mass destruction and destroying them being the first and foremost objection of the second war in Iraq. Problem with this is when we went into the country militarily, we did not find weapons of mass destruction. This makes our just cause um, something that people will scrutinize and begin to question American policy and military intervention. So you'll see that the American policy makers will need to create a next justification for going into Iraq militarily. And so the next justification was to be able to remove a hostile and evil dictator from power. And certainly those conditions and describe Saddam Hussein, but was not the original objective of going into Iraq militarily. And then finally, a third objective was authored by American policy makers, and that is once Saddam Hussein was taken out of power, then we could recreate a more democratic government in Iraq, um, hoping to create peace and stability in that region and perhaps maybe an American ally. Um, Unlike the beginning days in the war in Afghanistan, a military involvement in Iraq faced tremendous opposition. As you can see in the image on the left, in 2003, when all of this was being debated in the UN Security Council, the country of France, which is a permanent member of the UN Security Council and given a Security Council veto power, threatened to veto any Security Council resolution of using force in Iraq to be able to dismantle their weapons of mass destruction. So since the United States would not be able to get UN approval, the United States went in unilaterally or went in alone. Of course, we did have some other nations that participated with us, but this was not a global approved sanctioned event, which brought about a tremendous amount of opposition. As you can see in the next image to the right, the various protests, gatherings that was organized, and this happened across the globe and even in the United States as people were a bit dubious on using American military power in Iraq a second time. Of course, the story is the United States did go in militarily. We used a military strategy called shock and awe, as you can see in the Newsweek cover, identified, showing you Baghdad, the capital of Iraq, and after a number of missile strikes the United States had launched. This YouTube clip just gives you some shock and awe video footage. Once we went into the country, we did not find weapons of mass destruction, but we did capture Saddam Hussein, who was hiding out and trying to evade American forces. Once he was captured, he was put on trial in his country by the new government in Iraq. He was found guilty, and then as you can see in the lower left-hand corner, he was executed by hanging. So in the early days of this war, we dismantled the Iraqi military and the Iraqi government quite quickly. As you can see here on this aircraft carrier, a PR moment was staged where the President George W. Bush made public remarks on the mission being accomplished in Iraq. Of course, that was proved to be untrue. From 2003 to 2011, an insurgency broke out where you had Iraqi militia and foreign fighters coming across the border, of course, sponsored by Al Qaeda, and Iran also became a heavily sponsor of militia forces to be able to confront this new Iraqi government and also U.S. forces that were in the country. To be able to confront this insurgency, more troops had to be inserted into the country, um, and this became highly controversial, certainly since Americans uh, and, and some people in the world were opposed to this war in Iraq. The first time having troops increased was something that was heavily debated and disputed. But 20,000 troops were added in 2007 to be able to confront the insurgency. In December of 2011, this war ended. American troops were removed from Iraq. The YouTube clip there that you should access is of the last troops crossing the border, exiting Iraq into Kuwait, officially ending the United States war in Iraq. The big question for us to consider is what's going on in Iraq today. Despite the fact that the United States forces aren't in there, this is a story and a global issue that is worthy of looking at. And the short of it is that Iraq today is on the verge of civil war because of the two Muslim groups, Sunni versus Shia. The YouTube clip there will give you a news report of the violence between these two groups today, and the question of whether or not Iraq is on the verge of collapse.